They called it a clean exit. But in the white glare of legal's office, nothing looked clean, especially not the signature they pushed across the table. The conference room was colder than usual that Thursday, not because of the AC, but because of who sat across from me. Melissa from HR had a clipboard on her lap and a folder in front of her. A thick, matte, navy folder with my name typed cleanly on the front. No title, no smiley face, just all caps, black ink. Behind her, the blinds were half shut, slicing the morning sun into sterile stripes across the long glass table. It felt like being in an X-ray, exposed, clinical, and silent. She didn't offer water. "Let's go over a few things together," Melissa began, voice oiled with artificial calm. Nothing urgent, just end-of-cycle housekeeping. Housekeeping? I'd just led the team that closed a 3-year project. My last feedback review had the word indispensable in it. I remembered because it surprised even me. I nodded, not speaking yet. That was the first test. Silence. See if I'd panic fill it. I didn't. She opened the folder and slid a printed form across the table, neatly aligning it with the edge like it mattered. Separation agreement. Clean exit. "Just a formality," she said. "Standard language, HR's updated template. You'll see it looks cleaner." Her eyes didn't match her smile. They never had. 2 years ago, when Melissa had taken over HR, she'd smiled the same way while reducing everyone's vacation rollover policy. "It simplifies things," she'd said then too. Back in the room, I scanned the paper. It was 4 pages, short by corporate standards, the kind of brevity designed to seem harmless. "I don't remember initiating an exit," I said. Melissa didn't blink. "No, this is a voluntary step. We're offering a package." Package, like a present, wrapped in silence. No conversation about cause, no paper trail of feedback, no termination type box ticked. Just me, agreeing to vanish quietly. They'd done this before. She leaned forward, a soft rustle of polyester. "You'd retain health coverage through end of quarter. And," she tapped a line near the bottom, "we're including a positive reference clause. It's very generous." There, the bait. That's when I noticed it. A line near the middle, formatted slightly differently, small font, almost decorative. "Employee confirms this agreement is entered into freely, without undue influence or coercion of any kind." It looked harmless, innocuous, standard, but it wasn't. "Can I take this home to review?" I asked. She smiled again. "It's not necessary. Legal already reviewed it." Micro pause, not my legal, theirs. Then she added, "We'd like to wrap this up today. It's all routine." That was the second test. Back at my desk, I didn't pack. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, pulled up the company's termination policies, HR protocol logs, and the most overlooked file in most exits, the change tracking log of document revisions. It wasn't on our cloud, but I'd archived one version from last quarter, just in case. It had no line about coercion. Melissa's updated form did. Someone had quietly added a legal shield, so HR could claim I signed calmly, under no pressure, even if I later contested. But pressure wasn't always yelling. Sometimes it was being told to smile as you disappear. By 3 p.m., I signed it. Calmly. Neatly. Melissa exhaled, mistaking surrender for ignorance. I didn't speak. I just emailed a copy of the doc to my personal inbox along with the older version. Subject: coercion evidence, version comparison. By 5 p.m., I emailed a copy to an employment attorney I'd met once at a tech mixer. The subject line was a quote. "This line admits direct pressure," I wrote. "Let me know if you agree. Not all signatures are silent. Some whisper loud enough for legal to listen." I didn't expect the callback to come that fast. The attorney, Aisha Keller, called me just after lunch the next day. Her voice was crisp, precise, the kind of voice that had argued in real courts, not just conference rooms. She didn't bother with small talk. "Did you sign under pressure?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Did they say it was optional?" "Yes, but with consequences implied." She paused. "Let's meet." I was already halfway to her office before I realized I hadn't eaten. Her firm was tucked between 2 art galleries downtown, with glass walls and a security desk manned by a woman who looked like she could handle both a printer jam and a hostile takeover. When I said Aisha's name, she just nodded and buzzed me in. The office was sunlit, but minimal. One long desk, legal pads stacked with surgical neatness, and a laptop open to a document I instinctively recognized, my agreement. The signature line glared back at me from the screen. "I'm glad you sent both versions," Aisha said, gesturing to the two printed pages clipped side by side. On the left, my signed copy. On the right, the standard template from Q2 without the coercion clause. "See this?" She pointed to the line HR had emphasized, entered into freely, without undue influence. Then she turned to me. "You know what this is?" "An insurance policy," I said. She nodded. "For them, not for you." That sentence, 12 words, was strategic armor. In legal disputes over wrongful terminations, the company's first line of defense was always, they agreed, willingly. But if you could prove the agreement itself was tainted, the whole clean exit began to rot at the root. Aisha's tone sharpened. "Did they offer you legal review before signing?" "No." "Did they explain what rights you were waiving?" "No." "Did they give you time to consider it?" I paused. "They said they'd like to wrap it up today." She raised an eyebrow. "That's pressure. Documented now. That changes things." She leaned forward. "Here's what we'll do. First, a formal request for internal records, meeting logs, draft history of the agreement. Any evidence of changes, second, we notify them we're reviewing the termination classification. You were never told what type it was, correct?" I nodded. They left that blank for a reason. Voluntary reads cleaner on reports, but if we uncover even one message suggesting they initiated this, it flips the narrative. She tapped the edge of the page with one red nail. "And if this goes to court, this line, your so-called consent, becomes our Exhibit A." The email went out that evening. Polite, surgical. Subject, request for documentation. Related to separation agreement. Within 24 hours, I received a reply, not from HR, but from the legal department directly. They wanted a clarifying call. Not an email, not a written reply, a voice conversation, no transcript. Aisha grinned when she saw it. "They're nervous. They want to feel out what you know without adding more to the record." "They think I'll fold?" "They're hoping." I didn't. The call was scheduled for Friday, 11:30 a.m. I logged in early, blazer on, notes in hand, camera centered. On the screen appeared two people, Melissa from HR and a man I hadn't met before, who introduced himself as Alex, Counsel for Corporate Compliance. Melissa smiled again. That signature HR smile, all vanilla tension and calculated calm. "Hi there. Thanks for hopping on. We just wanted to check if there was any confusion about the document you signed." I waited. Let the silence stretch like taffy. Then I said, "Actually, I'd like to clarify a few things myself, starting with who added that new sentence." Alex blinked. Melissa shifted. "I compared it to last quarter's standard form," I continued. "There's no record of that line, which raises the question, if this is the new HR template, where's the policy update log? Because I couldn't find one." The call went still. Then Alex said, "It's possible there was a version control oversight." I smiled, cold, quiet. That would make it even worse. Because then you had me sign an unauthorized document with permanent consequences. Melissa's smile faltered. Her voice cracked slightly. "We can review that internally." "You'll want to," I said, "because my counsel already is. They wanted me quiet, but now legal is scrambling to silence their own panic. Corporate silence is louder than words. Drop a comment if you've ever faced HR games masked as standard procedure. By Monday, the silence was too loud to ignore. No follow-up email, no calendar invite, not even a "thanks for your patience" from Melissa. Corporate silence is a very specific kind of noise. It fills the space between "we're reviewing internally" and "we hope you go away quietly." But I wasn't going anywhere. Aisha, as always, had a plan. "We're filing a demand for document tracebacks," she said, her tone flat, like she was ordering coffee. "They added a legal clause after your version. We want metadata. Who edited it, when, and under whose authorization." That kind of request doesn't just rattle HR. It echoes through internal Slack channels like a fire alarm someone tried to muffle with a sticky note. On Wednesday, something shifted. A new name appeared in my inbox, Kendra Lim, VP, Employee Relations. The kind of person who doesn't show up unless there's fire on the carpet. Her email was carefully worded. We'd appreciate a brief conversation to ensure alignment and address any miscommunication around your separation documents. Miscommunication. That word again. It always shows up right before someone offers you a coffee and a confidentiality clause. Aisha didn't even blink. We'll take the call, but on our terms. I'm joining, and we're recording. Friday, 10 a.m., new meeting title, Document Clarity Touchpoint. Aisha smirked. Sounds like a yoga class. The video call loaded with digital tension. Kendra's face appeared, sleek bun, pearl earrings, corporate serenity personified. But her eyes were scanning fast, calculating. Melissa joined late, cheeks flushed, eyes jumpy. Alex from compliance was there too, not speaking. We're aware, Kendra began, that there were inconsistencies in the versioning of our standard HR templates. We're conducting a legal review to ensure policy integrity. Aisha cut in. Excellent. We're happy to support that, provided we receive the full document history, including revision timestamps and access logs. We've also noted the termination type remains unspecified. That's a critical omission. Kendra nodded tightly. We're revisiting that classification internally, which was corporate for. We've been caught massaging records, and legal is now sweating in the war room. Then Aisha did something bold. She shared her screen. Side by side, the signed version versus the Q2 template zoomed in on the sentence HR had added, the one about freely entered, no undue pressure. There is no update log for this edit, she said calmly. No published version control, yet my client was presented this as standard. That's not just procedural sloppiness. That's coercion evidence disguised as policy. Kendra's silence said everything. Melissa cleared her throat. Our intention was never to mislead. That's not the standard, Aisha cut in. The standard is informed consent. What your office did was present a legal contract with unlogged edits during a pressured meeting, then asked for a signature on the spot. The call ended 20 minutes later, not with an apology, not with an answer, but with an awkward promise to circle back and elevate for internal discussion. Translation: damage control. Fast. By that afternoon, I had a new email in my inbox, subject line, updated record, termination classification. They had changed it, quietly, from voluntary to involuntary without cause. No explanation, no note, just a corrected label in a corporate system most employees never see. But I saw it, and so did Aisha. They're trying to close the wound, she said, but they've already bled too much. That night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something colder. Certainty. They had tried to erase me with a soft-voiced form and a forced smile, but now, somewhere deep in their digital trail, my story had left a scar. One they couldn't scrub. The change in the system should have felt like a win. Involuntary, without cause. 4 words that carried weight, legal weight, the kind of designation that shifted entire conversations. But inside, I didn't feel victorious. I felt like someone had finally admitted to pushing me, just not out loud. Over the weekend, my inbox stayed quiet, but Slack lit up like Christmas. People I hadn't heard from in weeks sent private messages. Hey, are you okay? Just saw some chatter. HR is spinning something about a template mix-up. Did you really hire outside counsel? And one message, anonymous, from an account named Burner Confessions. They've done this before. You're the first to push back. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend I was above the gossip mill. But something about that last message stuck, so I did what I hadn't done in weeks. I logged into the internal policy portal, not the one everyone sees, the one behind the VPN where HR stores the unlisted PDFs and versioning logs. It took 5 clicks and a forgotten bookmark folder, but I found it. There, buried deep under HR Policies Drafts Legacy Do Not Use, was a document titled Separation Agreement R V3 Clean Rev Final. It had been edited exactly 3 days before my meeting with Melissa. And the editor? A user ID tagged as MLHR01, Melissa, direct edit, no legal counter signature. I took a screenshot. Then I opened the metadata. Revision timestamp, Tuesday, 6:42 p.m. My meeting was Thursday morning. I sent it to Aisha. 5 minutes later, she called me, voice sharper than usual. This just moved from unethical to legally actionable. I stayed quiet. Let the weight of it land. They created a coercion clause with no legal sign-off, she said, pacing audibly. That violates their own policy framework. If we push this, it won't just be about your case. This becomes systemic. Do we go public? I asked. No, she said. Not yet. First, we make sure they know we can. Monday morning, I walked into the building, not for work, but for something louder, visibility. No one expected to see me, especially not with calm steps. A straight back and a manila envelope tucked under my arm. Inside it, the signed agreement, the outdated version, the metadata screenshot, the revised classification email, and a cover letter addressed to the board liaison for ethics and compliance. HR didn't greet me. They watched me walk past the reception desk like I was a ghost they'd tried to bury, and failed. I left the envelope with the assistant outside the ethics office, signed the visitor log, and walked out without looking back. By noon, Aisha had received a formal acknowledgement. We are conducting a review. No timeline, no apology, no admission. But the door had been kicked open. Then came the real shift. A friend from inside sent me a screen-recorded snippet from an internal training update. Melissa's name had been removed from the Policy Gatekeepers section. In her place, temporarily vacant. No explanation. No note, just silence. The corporate kind. But this time, it sounded different. Not avoidance, not arrogance. It sounded like fear. And fear, when cornered, makes mistakes. They say systems don't panic. People do. But I've learned, when a system is made of people hiding behind process and the process begins to crack, the panic leaks through the seams. The cracks started with an invitation. Subject: policy review, feedback opportunity, confidential participants. No sender name, just a system address tied to corporate oversight. The kind that usually issues annual surveys no one reads. But this wasn't a survey. This was bait. Aisha called it before I could even ask. They're testing your temperature, she said, trying to see how far you'll go without admitting guilt. Don't respond. Let them stew. But curiosity itched, so I created a burner email and requested a copy of the confidential feedback form. It wasn't confidential. The metadata was tied to employee ID numbers, and the questions weren't about HR policy updates. They were about me. Have you interacted with redacted in the past 90 days? Were you aware of the recent revision to the clean separation agreement? In your view, should policy templates be reviewed by employees outside legal? It wasn't oversight. It was a pulse check, sent to people they thought might talk. Then came the rumor. A Slack channel meant for cross-functional project chatter suddenly locked. Dozens of users removed. Access revoked. Later that day, a friend in finance forwarded me an internal comms memo. All documentation requests must now be routed through legal directly. HR is temporarily suspending direct document distribution pending internal audit. Translation: they're hiding the vault, but it was too late. Aisha already had what we needed. The next step wasn't about internal chaos, it was about exposure, the kind that doesn't come from rage but from receipts. We drafted a letter, not just to HR, not just to legal, but to the external corporate watchdog that oversees compliance for publicly traded firms, the Regulatory Governance Board. Aisha submitted a formal complaint detailing the unlogged modification of separation agreements, the absence of legal co-signature, evidence of coercive timing and language, the false classification of a termination as voluntary and attached, every document, every timestamp, every quiet act of digital manipulation. 3 days passed. Then, at exactly 9:03 a.m. on a Thursday, the company made its move. Not against me, but against itself. Internal alert. All employees mandatory acknowledgement of updated HR policy protocols. Please review by EOD. The revised policy removed the line entirely. No more freely entered without undue influence. Just legal silence where manipulation once lived. It should have felt like closure. But systems never close their own cases. They just learn to rewrite the script. and I could already see the new version forming, one where Melissa took the fall, a single name sacrifice so the rest could remain untouchable. That's when I made a decision. I wouldn't let them frame this as a one-time error, because it wasn't. It was a model, and someone had to break it, out loud. So I reached out. To a journalist. The kind who doesn't write with adjectives, only evidence. I didn't offer an interview. I offered a folder. No NDA, no off the record, no blurred lines, just facts, receipts, pressure, dressed as paperwork, and a line that, once removed, spoke louder than when it was written. The journalist's name was Celine Tran. Short sentences, sharp questions, and a voice like clean metal. Nothing wasted, nothing soft. We met in a cafe that smelled like burned espresso and new lawsuits. She didn't ask about how I was feeling. She asked for proof. I handed her the folder, the same one I'd walked into the ethics office with, plus a few additions. The screen recording of the internal Slack wipe, the policy draft logs, the clean version of the form, and the one that wasn't. And the latest gem, an anonymous tip I'd received just hours earlier. It came from a disposable inbox. No name, no signature, just this message. They use the same clause on at least 4 exits this quarter, all women, 2 over 50. Attached was a PDF, redacted but recognizable. Same clause, same format, same manipulation, different victims. Celine scrolled through it without blinking. "This isn't just a paper trail," she said. "It's a pattern." She tapped the table once. "I'll need verification, and you might not like what comes next." I didn't flinch. I haven't liked anything about this since HR said it would look cleaner. 3 days later, her piece dropped. It wasn't a headline, it was a detonation. Voluntary or vanished, inside one company's quiet weaponization of HR forms. Subheader: multiple sources allege the use of clean exit language to silence terminations, avoid severance classification, and preempt legal exposure. The story didn't name the company directly, yet, but the details were surgical. Date ranges, document phrasing, procedural gaps, and one phrase that caught fire: coercion, clause by clause. Within an hour, the article trended. By noon, internal teams were forwarding it to each other like contraband. Melissa's LinkedIn went dark by 4 p.m. Corporate's official account posted a vague, trembling statement. "We take policy integrity seriously. We are reviewing recent concerns and reaffirm our commitment to ethical HR practices." Aisha read it aloud on speakerphone and laughed. "That's not a statement," she said. "That's a pre-legal shield." Then she said something else. Quiet, but it stayed with me. "They thought you'd walk away. You walked through." The ripple effect started small. A message from someone in procurement. "I've been here 14 years. I thought I imagined it when they pushed that doc on my teammate. You've made me feel like I wasn't crazy." Then one from an ex-employee in Europe. "We saw the same language 6 months ago. They used GDPR to hide it. Not anymore." Then one more, from an internal HR coordinator, anonymous but specific. That clause, it came from above. Melissa didn't write it. She was the delivery system, and now they're scrubbing logs. That was the final switch. This wasn't just about me anymore. Celine reached out again. "We have enough to name the company now, but it's your call." I looked out the window, past the office buildings and branded lobbies. They had the logo. They had the documents. They had the clause. But I had the truth. And the truth, when backed by records, is the one thing HR can't file away. I told her, "Name them." She paused. "Sure?" I smiled. "Make it clean." The company's name appeared in the morning edition like a dropped glass in a quiet room. Black serif font. No embellishment, no denial. Exodus Corp. Under internal investigation following a reports of coercive exit practices. Below that, direct quotes from unnamed employees, screenshots of the now deleted policy drafts, a timeline, sourced, verified, footnoted. The article included one sentence that rewired everything. In one case, a clause acknowledging freedom from pressure was added post-template without legal review, then presented as standard to the employee during an unscheduled HR meeting. It didn't name me, but it echoed me, and in echo, there is power. By noon, Exodus Corp's board had issued a statement. A real one this time. Legal reviewed, crisis scrubbed. We acknowledge discrepancies in our HR documentation procedures. We are launching an independent audit and placing the responsible parties on administrative leave pending results. That's corporate speak for. Heads will roll quietly. Please stop looking. But the press didn't stop. They never do when paper turns to blood. Within hours, 3 more outlets had picked up the story. One headline asked the question I'd been asking since the first moment HR handed me that form. How many signatures were silenced? Aisha and I sat in her office that evening. The light was low. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. You started a precedent, she said, flipping through her legal pad. I've had 6 new inquiries in 2 days. Same clause, different firms. I watched her underline a phrase. Standard language used without consent. She looked at me. You understand this is bigger than a payout, right? I nodded. I don't want money. She raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I didn't answer right away, because it wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice in the dramatic sense. What I wanted was for them to be unable to do it again, not without fear. The fallout came in waves. Melissa officially resigned. No announcement, no party, no email thread, just gone. Kendra was reassigned to a strategic transition role. Whatever that means in HR language, the internal Slack policy hub now required dual auth for edits and kept public change logs. Legal now co-signed all exit documentation. And the clause, the one that nearly erased me, gone. Scrubbed from every document template across the company, but not from the story. Celine's article was now cited in HR ethics webinars. Law school students requested anonymized versions for case studies. A professional HR forum added it to their what not to do curriculum. Late one night, I received a LinkedIn message from a stranger. I almost signed it too. I paused because of your story. Thank you. No name, no ask. Just a thank you. Digital, quiet, real. I sat there in my kitchen, lights off, laptop glowing, and for the first time in months, I felt done. Not defeated, not vindicated. Just done. But systems don't forget. They adapt. And now, every time someone's asked to sign something routine, they pause. They look closer. They remember the story of the woman who didn't storm out. She documented everything, and it was enough. 3 months later, I got a calendar invite from HR, the same HR that once handed me a form in a cold room with artificial smiles and weaponized politeness. Subject: Alumni check-in and exit experience survey debrief. There was no Melissa, no Kendra, no Alex from compliance, just a new name. Jonas Delgado, Director of Organizational Integrity, a title they probably invented just for this. The meeting was optional, which made it more dangerous. They were hoping I'd say yes, maybe even offer them closure. But I accepted, because I wanted to see how deep the rot had gone, and whether anything had actually changed beneath the polished surface. Jonas greeted me with the kind of smile people use at memorial services. Practiced, apologetic, not entirely comfortable. I appreciate your time, he said. I understand things were not handled correctly. I raised an eyebrow. Is that the official phrasing now? He didn't flinch. He opened a folder, real paper, not digital. Inside, I recognized my case notes, or at least their filtered version. There's a line item here now, he said, pointing, that classifies your exit as contested involuntary, resolved with audit findings. That wasn't a termination type. That was a scar. He offered me tea. I declined. Then he asked, "Is there anything you wish we'd done differently?" I almost laughed, but instead I said, "You treated silence as strategy. You turned a policy into a pressure tactic, and you underestimated the power of a calm signature followed by very loud facts." He nodded, wrote something down, not on a laptop, in a notebook, with a pen. I couldn't tell if it was performative or real. Then he said something strange. "We're testing a new clause in our separation docs now, one that requires both parties to review with legal counsel before signing. Mandatory." I leaned back, let that sink in. They hadn't removed the tool. They'd just started locking the cabinet. Later that week, I got a package, no return address. Inside, a book. Cover: Modern Employment Law, Case Studies in Ethical Frameworks. Chapter 11 was bookmarked. A sticky note read, "You're in here," nicely anonymized but unmistakable. I sat with that for a long time, because for all the silence that followed my case, the boardrooms, the reforms, the HR reshuffling, the loudest thing they did was quietly rewrite the rules. Not because they wanted to, but because I'd made it cost more to keep them the same. Aisha and I still talk. Sometimes it's about other clients. Sometimes it's about what they call policy ghosts, traces of bad practices that still linger in good companies. Systems don't forget, she once told me, but people do, until someone forces the memory back into the light. I became that someone, once. Not because I set out to, but because someone handed me a form and assumed I wouldn't read between the lines. I still have both versions of that agreement. The clean one and the real one, side by side, framed on my wall. A reminder that even a checkbox in the wrong hands can become a weapon, and a whisper, and if documented, can take down an entire script built on silence. There's something surreal about watching your own story become institutional memory. 6 months after the article dropped, Exodus Corp published a revised termination and transition policy deck. Slide 1, our commitment to clarity, consent, and process integrity. Slide 7, a clause highlighted in red, then struck through. Below it, language deprecated due to misuse in prior versions. See audit report, Q326. They didn't name me, but they didn't have to. The audit itself had become internal gospel. It lived in a confidential section of their compliance portal, only accessible to leadership and legal. But copies leaked. Of course they did. Page 14. The inclusion of language affirming non-coercion was not approved by legal, yet appeared in at least 5 separation documents. 4 of those terminations were later reclassified. Page 20. Recommendations include mandatory dual signatory review, revision tracking visible to employees, and external counsel access, where requested. Page 32, a short line. A culture of silence enabled misuse. That one stung the most, because it was true. The ripples spread wider than I expected. Other firms, competitors, partners, even former clients, began conducting quiet reviews of their own templates. A few issued policy memos. Some purged language completely. One hosted an HR roundtable titled Ethics in Exit Agreements, Learning from the Fallout. I watched the live stream. Melissa wasn't there, but her decisions sat in every slide, a shadow curriculum. Meanwhile, Celine Tran's follow-up piece landed with surgical precision. The fine print, when silence becomes structure. It didn't focus on me, it focused on the system. She broke down the anatomy of coercive design, how formatting, timing, and tone combined to suppress objections. A boxed phrase, a time-limited offer, a locked PDF, legal coercion, dressed in UI/UX. It hit harder than any exposé of names ever could. Aisha and I spoke one evening after the article's release. "You realize what you did, right?" she asked. I smiled. "I caused an HR panic?" She shook her head. "No, you introduced friction into a system that relied on smooth exits, and now every form they hand out carries the weight of 1,000 eyes. That weight, I carry it too, but now it feels lighter, distributed, seen. I started getting invitations, not job offers, conversations, webinars, ethics panels, university law courses asking for anonymized testimony. One email came from a startup HR tech company. "We're designing a transparency tool. We want your input. You've lived what we're trying to prevent." And just like that, something shifted. This wasn't about the company anymore, or the clause, or even me. It was about redesigning the script, not erasing stories, but preventing them. I still remember the sentence that started it all. "It'll look cleaner," HR said, handing me the form. They were right. It did look clean, but now I know. Clean isn't the same as honest, and calm isn't the same as consent. And silence, when documented, can turn into sound, the kind that breaks policies and rebuilds them. I don't think of it every day anymore. Some days I go entire mornings without remembering the form, or the room, or the way Melissa slid that paper toward me like it was a favor. Other days I'm reminded in small ways. A contract I'm asked to sign, a checkbox at the bottom of a waiver, the word standard in someone's email. But the reaction has changed. I don't flinch, I read, I pause, and I ask the question they never expected. Who wrote this? It's the question that reshapes rooms. It turns meetings from formality to friction, because someone always wrote it, and someone, somewhere, is always hoping you won't ask. I don't work in that building anymore. I don't check their Glassdoor page or their stock performance. I don't need to. The real aftermath isn't in revenue or headcount. It's in process changes, in hesitation, in how people look at a signature line now. And wait. I started writing again. Not articles, not manifestos, just notes, observations, small things. I collect phrases the way others collect stamps or seashells. Little artifacts of how systems still try to soften pressure with politeness. Like, this is just for alignment. It's easier if you just sign now. Legal already looked at it. Those lines live in a folder on my desktop called Unsaid Pressure. One day, maybe it'll be a book, or maybe not. Maybe it's enough that it exists. Because documentation, real documentation, doesn't always end in a lawsuit. Sometimes it ends in awareness. I ran into someone from the old office last month. We were both in line for coffee. She looked at me for a second too long before saying, "You're the reason they made us go through legal before any off-boarding now." She said it with a mix of annoyance and admiration, like someone who hated being slowed down but knew they were safer for it. I just nodded. "You're welcome," I said. I still keep the two documents, framed, side by side, one with the coercion clause, one without. They sit on a shelf next to my books, my mug, my keys, not as trophies, but as evidence of what happens when someone says nothing, then documents everything. The story doesn't end with a court ruling, or a press conference, or a dramatic apology. It ends here, with one woman, in her apartment, living a life they tried to erase with a signature. She didn't burn the building down. She didn't scream in the lobby. She just wrote it down, and it was enough.